The fastest way to lose everything is to underestimate someone who never needed your approval in the first place. At 8:55 on a clear Saturday morning, Greenhaven Park was already alive with activity. Families pushed strollers along winding sidewalks. Joggers followed the trail around the lake, and volunteers arranged rows of folding chairs near a temporary stage decorated with city banners. The annual Safe Streets open community event was scheduled to begin in less than an hour, and city officials were expected to arrive at any moment. The atmosphere felt hopeful, the kind of morning that made people believe their city could become something better. Near the edge of the park, beneath the shade of a large oak tree, sat Angela Brooks. A leather portfolio rested on her lap, while several neatly organized documents lay beside her on the bench. Dressed in a professional Navy suit, she appeared calm and focused, occasionally reviewing notes before looking out across the park. To everyone passing by, she seemed like another visitor enjoying the morning. Nobody paid much attention to her. That was exactly how she preferred it. Angela believed people revealed their true character when they thought nobody important was watching. Less than 50 yards away, Officer Ryan Keller walked along the main pathway, scanning the crowd. His uniform was spotless, his posture confident, and his expression carried the certainty of a man who believed he was in complete control of his surroundings. Ryan had spent nearly 15 years in law enforcement. He knew the park. He knew the event schedule. Most importantly, he believed he knew who belonged and who did not. As he continued his patrol, his eyes landed on Angela. Something about her presence immediately drew his attention. She sat alone near a section reserved for event staff and invited guests. Ryan slowed his pace. Nearby volunteers continued setting up tables. Children laughed near the playground. A local news crew prepared cameras beside the stage. Yet Ryan's attention never left the woman on the bench. Angela glanced at her watch. 5 minutes until the scheduled arrival of the first city delegation. She returned to her notes without concern. Ryan adjusted his radio and changed direction. He began walking toward her. Around them, the morning continued as normal. Birds moved between tree branches. The fountain near the center of the park sparkled in the sunlight. A group of elementary school students followed their teacher toward the event area, carrying handmade community posters. Nobody noticed the approaching collision between authority and assumption. Angela looked up briefly as Ryan approached. Their eyes met for only a second. Ryan interpreted her calm expression as indifference. Angela simply offered a polite nod before returning her attention to the documents in her lap. What neither the volunteers nor the families enjoying the park realized was that the next few minutes would become the most talked-about part of the entire event. Because the officer walking toward that bench believed he was about to question an ordinary visitor. In reality, he was taking the first steps toward a decision that would follow him long after the crowds went home and the stage lights were turned off. Greenhaven Park had been chosen for the Safe Streets open community event for a reason. Years earlier, the city had struggled with growing distrust between neighborhoods and public institutions. The annual gathering was designed to bring people together, creating a space where families, city leaders, volunteers, and law enforcement could meet face-to-face in an atmosphere built on openness rather than distance. On most years, the event passed without incident. This year was supposed to be even more important. New programs were being introduced. Community partnerships were expanding. City leaders hoped the gathering would mark the beginning of a new chapter. Across the park, volunteers finished arranging rows of white folding chairs beneath colorful banners carrying messages about unity and public service. Local business owners set up information booths. Children gathered near activity tables covered with art supplies and community projects. The scent of fresh coffee drifted from a vendor stand near the fountain. Everything about the morning suggested optimism. Angela Brooks quietly observed it all from her bench beneath the oak tree. She was not there simply to attend the event. She was studying it. The conversations, the interactions, the small moments most people overlooked. On her lap rested a draft of a speech she planned to deliver later that morning. Several pages contained notes written in neat handwriting. Words about trust, accountability, respect, She had spent months helping design programs intended to strengthen relationships between city agencies and the communities they served. Yet Angela believed no report or presentation could reveal as much as real life. That was why she arrived early. She wanted to see how people treated one another before the cameras started rolling. A breeze moved through the trees, scattering a few leaves across the path. Angela glanced toward the stage area where city workers adjusted microphones and tested speakers. Her phone vibrated softly. A message from the mayor's office appeared on the screen. The city delegation was running exactly on schedule. Arrival remained set for 9 o'clock. Angela smiled faintly and placed the phone back inside her portfolio. Nearby, a teacher named Emily Carter guided a group of elementary school students across the lawn. The children carried posters decorated with bright colors and messages about kindness. Emily reminded them to stay together and listen carefully once the program began. Their excitement brought energy to the entire park. Angela watched them for a moment and felt encouraged. Moments like these reminded her why the work mattered. Less than a minute later, she noticed Officer Ryan Keller approaching from the opposite side of the pathway. His pace was deliberate. His attention remained fixed on her. Angela had encountered people like Ryan throughout her career. People who formed conclusions before asking questions. People who mistook confidence for authority and authority for ownership. She closed her portfolio gently and placed it beside her. The park remained peaceful. Families continued enjoying the morning. Volunteers continued preparing for the event. Yet something in Ryan's expression suggested that the calm atmosphere was about to change. As he drew closer, several nearby visitors glanced in his direction before returning to their activities. Nobody expected anything unusual. To them, it looked like an officer performing a routine check. Angela remained seated, relaxed, patient. The clock on the nearby event tent displayed 8:58. 2 minutes remained before the city delegation arrived. 2 minutes before the entire morning would begin moving in a direction nobody standing in that park could possibly predict. Officer Ryan Keller stopped a few feet from the bench and folded his arms. For a moment, he simply looked at Angela Brooks, as though trying to determine whether she belonged there. Around them, the park continued its cheerful rhythm. Children laughed near the activity tents. Volunteers carried boxes of supplies toward the stage. The fountains sparkled beneath the morning sun. Yet beneath the peaceful atmosphere, a subtle tension had begun to form. Angela looked up calmly. "Good morning, officer," she said. Ryan gave a brief nod, but did not return the greeting. His eyes moved from her portfolio to the reserved seating area nearby. "Can I ask what you're doing here?" he said. The question itself sounded routine. The tone behind it did not. Angela remained composed, enjoying the park and preparing for the event. Ryan glanced again toward the restricted section. "Do you have credentials for the event?" Angela tilted her head slightly. "I'm expected here." Ryan frowned. The answer seemed to bother him more than satisfy him. "That is not what I asked." Angela could feel several nearby volunteers beginning to notice the conversation. She chose her words carefully. "I have business here this morning." Ryan shifted his weight and looked toward the stage where city workers were making final preparations. The reserve areas are for authorized guests and city personnel. Angela nodded politely. "I understand." Ryan waited. Angela did not say anything else. The silence seemed to frustrate him. Across the lawn, Emily Carter and her students approached one of the community booths. As she helped the children organize their posters, she glanced toward the bench and noticed the conversation unfolding. Something about the officer's posture immediately caught her attention. "Back near the oak tree," Ryan continued, "you are sitting awfully close to a restricted section for someone who has not shown any credentials." Angela closed her portfolio and rested her hands on top of it. "Officer, I assure you there's no issue." Ryan looked unconvinced. "Then it should be easy to show me proof." Angela studied him for a moment. Not with anger, not with fear, simply with curiosity. She had spent enough years working around public institutions to recognize when a person stopped gathering information and started looking for confirmation of assumptions they had already made. The clock near the event tent changed to 8:59. 1 minute until the arrival of the city delegation. Angela noticed it immediately. Ryan did not. A volunteer carrying event badges walked past them. He appeared ready to greet Angela, but was called away by another staff member before he could reach her. The moment passed unnoticed by everyone except Angela. Ryan interpreted her calm demeanor as resistance. "Look," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "We have procedures for a reason." Angela gave a small nod. "I agree. Then cooperate with them." The irony of the statement almost made her smile. Instead, she remained silent. A gentle breeze moved through the park, rustling the leaves overhead. Nearby conversations softened. People were beginning to pay attention without appearing obvious about it. They sensed that something unusual was happening. What nobody realized was that the entire direction of the morning was about to change. Because at that exact moment, several black city vehicles were turning onto the road leading toward Greenhaven Park, and every second brought them closer to the bench where Ryan Keller still believed he was in complete control of the situation. The first city vehicle appeared at the far entrance of Greenhaven Park just as the digital clock near the stage turned to 9 o'clock. Most people did not notice. Their attention remained focused on the booths, the children, and the preparations for the event. Ryan Keller certainly did not notice. His attention remained fixed on Angela Brooks. He had convinced himself that he was dealing with someone who needed to justify her presence. Angela, meanwhile, remained seated beneath the oak tree with the same calm expression she had carried all morning. The contrast between them was becoming impossible to ignore. Ryan glanced toward the reserved seating area once more. "I'm asking one final time," he said. "Do you have authorization to be here?" Angela looked at him steadily. "I'm exactly where I am supposed to be." Ryan frowned. The answer sounded simple, yet it irritated him more than any argument could have. Around them, several nearby volunteers had quietly stopped working long enough to observe the exchange. Emily Carter noticed it too. Standing beside her students, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Something about the interaction felt wrong. She did not know who Angela was, but she knew the woman had done nothing to deserve the attention she was receiving. Emily activated the camera and began recording discreetly. Ryan took a step closer to the bench. "This area is reserved for invited guests." Angela nodded politely. "Understand. Then perhaps you should move to another section of the park." Angela glanced around at the families enjoying the event and the children carrying handmade posters. "I'm comfortable where I am." Several people nearby exchanged looks. Ryan's jaw tightened. The conversation was no longer about information. It had become about control. Angela recognized the shift immediately. She had seen it before in conference rooms, public hearings, and community meetings across the country. The moment when someone stopped listening because they had already decided they were right. A volunteer approached carrying a clipboard. He looked directly at Angela and opened his mouth as if preparing to speak, but Ryan immediately intercepted him. "Everything is under control here," Ryan said. The volunteer hesitated, looked confused for a second, then hurried away after being called by another staff member. Angela watched the missed opportunity disappear into the crowd. Ryan never realized what had just happened. Nearby, Emily continued recording. Her students stood quietly beside her, sensing that something important was unfolding. The atmosphere around the bench felt noticeably different now. Conversations softened. People watched without wanting to appear obvious. Then, from across the park, the sound of car doors opening echoed through the morning air. Several black city vehicles had arrived beside the main event entrance. Volunteers straightened their posture. Event organizers checked their schedules. Staff members began moving toward the welcome area. Angela glanced briefly in that direction before returning her attention to Ryan. The officer noticed the movement across the park but dismissed it. In his mind, whatever official business was happening elsewhere had nothing to do with the woman sitting in front of him. That assumption would not survive much longer. Because while Ryan continued focusing on the wrong person for the wrong reasons, the people arriving through the front entrance were already searching for someone very specific. And within moments, every eye in Greenhaven Park would be looking toward the same bench beneath the oak tree. Emily Carter kept her phone steady as she recorded from distance. She had started filming only because something about the conversation felt unfair, but now she could sense that the moment carried more weight than she originally thought. Around her, several adults had also begun paying attention. They were not gathering in a crowd. They simply found reasons to linger nearby. Some stood beside information booths. Others paused along the walking path. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something they could not yet identify. Beneath the oak tree, Angela Brooks remained seated with remarkable patience. The morning sunlight filtered through the leaves above her, casting shifting patterns across the bench. Her portfolio rested beside her. Her posture remained relaxed. If she felt annoyed or uncomfortable, she did not show it. Ryan Keller interpreted that calmness as stubbornness. In reality, Angela had learned long ago that composure often revealed more truth than confrontation ever could. Ryan glanced toward the event entrance again. More activity was taking place there now. Volunteers were straightening banners. Event coordinators checked clipboards. A few city employees hurried between tents carrying folders and radios. Still, Ryan paid little attention. He was focused on winning a conversation that no longer needed to happen. "You seem very confident for someone who has not shown any credentials," he said. Angela looked at him quietly. Confidence and credentials are not always the same thing. Ryan frowned. The answer only deepened his frustration. Nearby, one of the event organizers approached the area while scanning a printed schedule. He looked around as if searching for someone important. For a brief moment, his eyes landed on Angela. Recognition flashed across his face. Before he could reach her, another coordinator called his name from across the lawn. He hesitated, then rushed away. Once again, an opportunity passed unnoticed by Ryan. The clock near the stage now read 9:02. 2 minutes had passed since the city delegation arrived. Across the park, several black vehicles remained parked near the entrance while senior staff members greeted arriving officials. Angela noticed them. Ryan did not. Emily continued recording. One of her students tugged gently on her sleeve. "Who is that lady?" the child whispered. Emily looked toward Angela. "I do not know," she admitted, "but she seems very calm." The child nodded. Even a young student could see the difference between the two people beneath the oak tree. One appeared determined to prove authority. The other appeared completely comfortable without needing to prove anything at all. Then a new sound drifted across the park. Applause. It started near the main entrance and spread outward. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Volunteers straightened their posture. Event staff began moving with renewed urgency. Something important was happening. Ryan finally looked toward the entrance. A group of city officials had begun walking through the park. Their pace was deliberate, their attention focused. Several people stepped aside to let them pass. The mayor walked at the center of the group. Cameras from local news crews immediately shifted in their direction. Ryan assumed they were heading for the stage. That would have been the logical destination. Instead, the group continued across the lawn, moving directly toward the oak tree, toward Angela, toward the very bench where Ryan still stood convinced that he was dealing with an ordinary visitor. And with every step the officials took, the expressions on nearby faces began to change from curiosity to realization. The group of officials crossed the lawn with purpose, moving through the park as conversations gradually faded around them. People stepped aside instinctively. Volunteers paused in the middle of their tasks. Even the local news crews shifted their cameras away from the stage and toward the approaching delegation. Ryan Keller finally sensed that something unusual was happening. He straightened his posture and adjusted his uniform, assuming the officials were heading toward the main event area. Yet as the distance closed, a strange realization began to settle in. They were not walking toward the stage. They were walking directly toward the bench beneath the oak tree. Angela Brooks remained seated, completely unbothered by the attention. She looked toward the approaching group and offered a small, polite smile. Ryan noticed it immediately. His confidence wavered for the first time that morning. The mayor, Thomas Reynolds, led the delegation. Beside him walked department directors, community leaders, and senior city staff members. Several carried folders. Others spoke quietly among themselves. When they reached the bench, the mayor's face brightened. "There you are," he said warmly. "We have been looking for you." The words landed like a sudden silence across the park. Ryan glanced from the mayor to Angela and back again. For a moment, he seemed unable to process what he was seeing. Angela stood and shook the mayor's hand. "Good morning, Mayor Reynolds," she said. "Everything appears to be running on schedule." "Thanks to your work, it certainly is," the mayor replied. Around them, city staff members smiled and nodded respectfully toward Angela. One of the department directors stepped forward. "The community leaders are ready for your presentation whenever you are." Angela thanked her and picked up her portfolio. Ryan felt the ground shifting beneath every assumption he had made. Emily Carter lowered her phone slightly, stunned by what she was witnessing. The students standing beside her looked equally confused. They could tell something important had happened, even if they did not fully understand it yet. The mayor then turned toward Ryan. "Officer Keller," he said politely, "thank you for being here this morning." Ryan nodded quickly. "Of course, sir." The mayor gestured toward Angela. "I hope you have had a chance to meet Deputy Commissioner Angela Brooks." The world seemed to stop. Nearby conversations vanished completely. The fountain continued flowing in the background. Leaves moved gently overhead. Yet every person within earshot appeared frozen in place. Ryan stared at Angela. Deputy Commissioner. The title echoed in his mind. Angela Brooks was not an ordinary visitor. She was not a guest looking for directions. She was one of the most important officials involved in the entire event. But the surprise was only beginning. The mayor continued speaking. "Deputy Commissioner Brooks has been leading our new Community Trust Initiative and our Department Accountability Review Program. Much of today's event exists because of her work." Several reporters immediately began taking notes. Cameras turned fully toward Angela. The realization spread through the crowd, one face at a time. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. Every question he had asked, every assumption he had made, every unnecessary moment of suspicion, all of it had unfolded in front of the very person responsible for evaluating the relationship between city institutions and the communities they served. And as the morning sun shined across Greenhaven Park, Ryan Keller finally understood that the next few minutes were not going to unfold the way he had expected. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The realization moved across Greenhaven Park like a silent wave. Volunteers exchanged stunned glances. Community leaders paused mid-conversation. Even the reporters seemed momentarily unsure what question to ask first. Ryan Keller stood motionless. The confidence that had guided him throughout the morning had vanished, replaced by a growing awareness that every assumption he had made was now visible to everyone around him. Angela Brooks, however, showed no sign of triumph. She simply held her portfolio and listened as the mayor continued introducing members of the delegation. That calmness made the moment even more powerful. She did not need to prove anything. The truth was already doing that for her. Mayor Reynolds smiled toward the gathered crowd. "Deputy Commissioner Brooks has spent the last 8 months helping design our new Accountability and Community Trust Initiative," he said. "Today marks the public launch of that program." Several reporters immediately began writing notes. Camera operators adjusted their positions. The story they thought they were covering had suddenly become something else entirely. Ryan felt his pulse quicken. Accountability Initiative. Community Trust. The words echoed in his mind. Then came the second revelation. One of the senior city directors stepped forward holding a folder. Deputy Commissioner Brooks also oversees the independent evaluation team, reviewing public interactions and professional conduct standards across multiple departments. The sentence landed with even greater force than the first announcement. Angela was not simply a guest speaker. She was one of the people responsible for reviewing exactly the kind of behavior the city hoped to improve. Around the park, expressions shifted from surprise to understanding. The volunteers who had witnessed the conversation beneath the oak tree now realized why Angela's calmness had seemed so unusual. She had never needed to win an argument. She had only needed to observe. Emily Carter lowered her phone and stared at the screen. The entire interaction had been recorded. Every question, every assumption, every moment. She had started filming because something felt wrong. Now she understood why. Ryan cleared his throat. "Deputy Commissioner Brooks, I—" His voice trailed off before he could finish. Angela looked at him with the same composure she had shown all morning. There was no anger in her eyes, no desire to embarrass him. That somehow made the moment harder. "Officer Keller," she said politely, "good community relationships begin with respect. That applies to everyone." The words were simple, yet everyone nearby heard them. A quiet silence followed. The mayor checked his watch and motioned toward the stage. "We should begin the program." The delegation started moving across the lawn. Reporters followed. Community leaders fell into step behind them. Before leaving, Emily glanced once more at the video on her phone. She knew exactly where it needed to go. The recording showed more than a conversation. It showed a pattern that many people in the city had spent years trying to address. As Angela walked toward the stage beside the mayor, Ryan remained standing beneath the oak tree. The event was moving forward. The crowd was moving forward. Yet he could not shake the feeling that his own future had just started moving in the opposite direction. And somewhere inside City Hall, long before the morning was over, a video and several old complaints were about to meet each other for the very first time. The program began at 9:15, and within minutes hundreds of people filled the seating area facing the stage. Families settled into folding chairs. Community leaders gathered near the front rows. Reporters positioned themselves along the aisles while cameras captured every speech and presentation. From a distance, the event appeared to be unfolding exactly as planned. Yet behind the scenes, another story was moving forward far more quickly. Emily Carter stood near the back of the audience reviewing the recording on her phone. The more she watched, the more uncomfortable she felt. Nothing dramatic appeared on the screen. There were no raised voices, no public scene. What troubled her was something much simpler. The assumptions, the dismissive attitude, the contrast between Angela's calm professionalism and Ryan's determination to challenge her presence without cause. Emily had worked as a teacher for 12 years. She spent every day teaching children about fairness, respect, and treating people equally. Watching the video again, she knew she could not simply ignore it. A few minutes later, she approached one of the event coordinators and quietly explained what she had recorded. The coordinator listened carefully before directing her to a member of the city's accountability team. The video was transferred before the first keynote speech had even ended. Meanwhile, Angela stood on stage delivering her presentation. Her words focused on trust, transparency, and the responsibility public servants carried every day. The audience responded warmly. Community leaders nodded in agreement. Parents listened attentively. Many people found themselves inspired by her message. Yet what made her speech especially powerful was that nobody watching knew how closely the morning's events reflected the very issues she was discussing. Back near the perimeter of the park, Ryan continued his assigned duties. He attempted to focus on the event, but his thoughts kept returning to the conversation beneath the oak tree. Something about the way the officials had reacted to Angela troubled him. More than once, he considered approaching her to explain himself. Each time he decided against it. Across town, however, the situation was already moving beyond explanations. By 9:40, the video had reached the city's accountability office. Staff members compared it with several existing records connected to previous complaints. Individually, none of the complaints had produced significant action. Together, they revealed a pattern that was difficult to ignore. Similar concerns appeared again and again. Similar descriptions. Similar experiences reported by different people over multiple years. The timing could not have been worse for Ryan. Or perhaps, from another perspective, it could not have been more appropriate. The city had launched a new accountability initiative that very morning. The entire purpose of the program was to examine patterns rather than isolated incidents. By 9:55, several senior officials were reviewing the information together. By 10 o'clock, discussions had already begun regarding immediate next steps. Back at the event, Ryan remained unaware of how quickly everything was unfolding. He could see Angela speaking with community leaders after her presentation. He could see reporters requesting interviews. What he could not see was the growing stack of documents gathering around his name. 5 minutes had started this story. Less than an hour later, those same 5 minutes were beginning to reshape the future he thought was secure. By late afternoon, the Safe Streets, open community event was drawing to a close. Families packed up lawn chairs, volunteers folded tables, and city workers began dismantling banners that had fluttered above Greenhaven Park all day. The atmosphere remained positive. People left smiling, exchanging phone numbers, and discussing ideas for future community projects. From the outside, the event looked like a complete success. In many ways, it was. Yet one of the most important lessons of the day had taken place far from the stage. Shortly after 3 o'clock, Ryan Keller received a call requesting his presence at headquarters. The conversation was professional and brief. By then, the Accountability Review team had already completed an initial assessment of the video and the related records connected to previous complaints. Procedures were followed. Documentation was reviewed. The process moved exactly as it was designed to move. Ryan spent the afternoon answering questions and providing statements. For the first time in many years, he found himself on the receiving end of the kind of scrutiny he had rarely expected to face. Meanwhile, Angela Brooks remained at the park meeting with community leaders and residents. She listened to concerns about neighborhood safety, youth programs, and public trust. Not once did she mention the events beneath the oak tree that morning. Not once did she discuss Ryan by name. Her focus remained exactly where it had always been: improving relationships between public institutions and the people they served. As the sun began its slow descent across the city skyline, Mayor Reynolds joined her near the fountain. Together, they watched volunteers finish their work. "Today turned out differently than any of us expected," he said. Angela smiled faintly. Sometimes the most important lessons are not the ones planned in advance. The mayor nodded thoughtfully. Across the park, Emily Carter walked with her students toward the parking lot. Before leaving, she glanced back one final time. She felt proud that she had trusted her instincts and documented what she saw. Small actions mattered. Speaking up mattered. Fairness mattered. Those were lessons she would continue teaching long after this day was over. As evening settled over Greenhaven Park, Angela returned to the oak tree where the morning had begun. The bench remained exactly where it had been. The pathway was quieter now. The crowds were gone. Only the sound of birds and the distant flow of the fountain remained. She stood there for a moment, reflecting on everything that had happened. The day had never been about proving who she was. It had never been about status, titles, or authority. It had been about something much simpler. Every person deserves respect before anyone knows their position. Every person deserves dignity before anyone sees a badge, a title, or a credential. Angela picked up her portfolio and started walking toward the park exit. Behind her, the last rays of sunlight stretched across the grass. Ahead of her, more work awaited. More meetings, more reforms, more opportunities to build trust. But the lesson of that day would remain. Ryan Keller believed authority gave him the power to decide who belonged. Angela Brooks understood something far more important. Respect is not earned by rank. It is revealed by character. And sometimes a single morning is enough to show the difference between the two.